Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. I had a weird start this morning because I reached over to begin live streaming, and it appeared as that I was already streaming. So I'm not sure what that means. I have not been on live since Friday, so I know that I have not been streaming, or that my streaming has not been on all that time. So that's a little weird. But you know, the wonders of technology, right? And the glitches and the problems and the issues. So I assume that I am streaming right now to all of you. I know I'm going to Instagram because I'm going directly to Instagram on my cell phone. So I know that I'm coming to you guys, but I'm not quite sure what's going on with the rest. But we're going on anyway. Now, look, I'm in a little bit of an unusual situation, and I don't have time to explain the whole story to you, but I might have to break away from this program rather suddenly. We will see. Because, long story short, there's been a big controversy between me and a retailer over a certain product, and finally got the whole matter resolved. And so in order to avoid any further hassles, delays, they're resolving it this morning. And I could not get a different time. So if I have to break away, just bear with me, please. I'll do it. It'll be somewhat sudden, but that'll be the end of the program today. And that's just going to be the way it works. I don't think that's going to happen, though, because I don't think there's going to be any action until after the program is scheduled to end anyway, at 9 o'clock at the earliest. All right, having said that, I'll tell you, we are really living in some astounding and dangerous times. We really are. And what I'm referring to right now really is not crime, it's not inflation, it's not some of the other issues. But this latest Supreme Court decision, decided 6-3, by the way, in which Donald Trump is declared by the Supreme Court the presidency, not just Donald Trump. He brought the lawsuit, but that the presidency is declared to have absolute immunity in the carrying out of its core constitutional functions, absolute immunity, presumptive immunity in carrying out his official duties, which means that you can rebut the presumption from a legal perspective. Some of you will know this, others may not. This is kind of technical legal technical legal jargon, but a rebuttable presumption of the law means that you must present evidence to show that that presumption should not stand in that particular case. So what presumptive immunity for his official duties means that he is immune unless one can show by evidence that the president should not be immune in the way he carried out those particular official functions. Okay? So he's got presumptive immunity, but that presumption is rebuttable. And then he has no immunity when he's carrying out his unofficial duty. There's no such thing as unofficial duties. He's engaged in unofficial acts. When he's doing things of a private nature, he has no immunity. But folks, now what I just laid out for you, that's the fact. That Trump versus the United States, that's the Supreme Court decision in the nutshell. Absolute immunity for his core constitutional functions. Well, that would be things like his role as commander-in-chief, ordering the military, particularly in defending our country. It would be things like appointing cabinet officials. And we could probably name some others, but core constitutional duties, things that the president and only the president not only can do, but must do. Core constitutional. He has absolute immunity. So in other words, president appoints a cabinet member. Turns out they didn't properly vet the person. They hid something from them, and the person turns out to be a murderer. I'm just, freewheeling here. And the person goes out and murders somebody. Somebody later says, well, the president appointed that person and that person used their office to commit that murder, the president should be liable. The president has absolute immunity because in appointing that person, he was carrying out his official duties. Okay, that's just it, absolute immunity. Now, morally, suppose the president knew the person was a murderer, was in on it. I mean, some crazy stuff like that. Okay, that's a moral issue. But from a constitutional perspective, the rule is meant to protect presidents so that they can carry out their official duties without fear of what will happen after they're out of office, and people who did not agree with the way they carried out those duties want to come after them and either prosecute them or sue them, so that the president now is always hindered and hampered by, well, if I do this, somebody may later come after me for it. And what the Supreme Court is saying is the precedent and tradition of our country is that the president, so that he can carry out his duty without that fear and concern, must do so in his core constitutional responsibilities with absolute immunity. When it comes to his official duties, things that are not core constitutional responsibilities, but things that he does because they're part of his responsibility as president of the United States, even though they're not listed in the Constitution, he has presumptive immunity there. So for the most part, he cannot be sued, he cannot be prosecuted, but that can be overcome. And then his private capacity and his doing things that are not part of his official duties, he has no immunity. That's perfectly reasonable, rational. Look, I expect the Marxist Socialist No Brains channel and these people like Joy Reid and some of these other nutcases to say, oh, it's the end of the world and he's now a dictator, because they're stupid, number one. I mean, they really are. These are just dumb people. They have no ability to think through issues, number one. Number two, they have a cult-like blindness to their ideology. It's like they're in a cult, so they're taught and brainwashed to see things one way and one way only, and they can't think outside that. So somebody says, Donald Trump's going to be a dictator and a king now, and Donald Trump's going to be a dictator and a king now. Okay, repeat after me. Donald Trump is a great threat to our democracy. Donald Trump is a great threat to our democracy. Okay, would you unpack that and tell us why that is, how that is? They couldn't. They couldn't make a cogent argument because there is none to be made. Okay, there is none to be made. Well, what about January 6th? Well, January 6th, the President of the United States at that time wanted to slow the process to give himself and the country an opportunity to determine whether such fraudulent activities and gross irregularities that happened with the election so as to make its outcome in doubt. Okay? Now, people don't like that. Some people don't like that. Some people think he was completely off the wall to do that. I don't, but that's what he wanted. It spun out of control when people invaded the, some were invited, some walked into the Capitol, and they had to suspend the proceedings. So now 1,400 people were charged, well, not all of them were charged with this, but many were charged with obstructing an official proceeding. A statute apparently passed because of Enron. Some of you remember the Enron scandal. Some of you probably don't. It was a while ago. I think Enron must have been 20, 25 years ago, when they basically were trying to destroy documents and do things that would obstruct any ability to investigate the fraud that Enron had committed against its stockholders, its customers, you name it. I mean, it was the whole thing was a shell game. The Supreme Court has basically said the president has limited immunity, and it is not absolute in all cases. It's limited immunity, and these people are acting like it is the end of the world as they know it. Okay, now I expect these nutcases to do this. I expect the Communist News Network and the Atrophied Brain Channel and the No Brains Channel and the Marxist Socialist No Brains Channel. I expect all of them to do this because they're confirmed leftists. I don't expect the Supreme Court to do it. And folks, this is what I find most disturbing about this more than anything else on this immunity deal. What got me off my Enron? But this is what bothers me the most about it. You have Supreme Court justices using the rhetoric of the leftist street thugs. I mean, saying things like Sotomayor, who wrote the dissenting opinion, when he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he will now be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEALs, Team 6, to assassinate a political rival. Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power. Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon. Immune. 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 In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. Folks, I'm left speechless. I'm left speechless. How in the world can you say such things? I mean, first of all, think of what she's saying about her colleagues. That they and everyone who supports Donald Trump, that we want a dictatorship. Now, again, that's cult-like thinking. Because all the people I know who support Donald Trump would fight Donald Trump if they thought Donald Trump was trying to create a dictatorship. I know I would. I think you would too. That's the last thing in the world we want. What we want is our constitutional republic, not our democracy. Our constitutional republic preserved. That's what we want. We want the rule of law preserved. And these people are acting like the Supreme Court just gave us a dictatorship. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law? Say what? And that's a Supreme Court justice saying that, not AOC. Of course, she's saying the same thing, in effect. It just goes to show that the left has done such a thorough job of brainwashing people to get them to think like that, that even at the highest levels of our government, this is the Supreme Court we're talking about, they talk like a bunch of rabid college students calling for a revolution. You and I know the president's not a king above the law. And I just told you what the case entails. And yet we get this, that under what core constitutional responsibility can the president order a Navy SEAL team to assassinate a political rival? Because there's absolute immunity for his core constitutional responsibilities. Under what core constitutional responsibility can the president say, Navy SEALs, I want you to go out and assassinate and pick the person? Because that person's a political rival. Go kill him. Oh, no, I can't be prosecuted because I have absolute immunity. That's not within the boundaries of his official duties. Of course he wouldn't have immunity for some stupid mess like that. Not that President Trump would ever try anything like that. But I would remind you, since they brought it up, do you remember Barack Obama, who made the decision that he was going to kill American turned terrorist Anwar al-Awlaki? Do you remember that? That was in 2011. Does anybody remember that? And there was some debate about that because al-Awlaki was in fact a terrorist, had in fact, for all practical purposes, joined with Osama bin Laden and others, but he was an American citizen too. And that was not in dispute. And there was some debate. Wait a minute. Can the president just order the killing of an American citizen? And by the way, I mean, so basically, where would they? I wonder, would they say that Barack Obama should be prosecuted? Because Anwar al-Awlaki's grandfather actually, tried to sue the Obama administration and was prevented from doing so because that was Obama acting in his official capacity. So I wonder what these leftists on the court would say about that. But I notice they don't bring that up. Because if they want to be intellectually honest, they should say, we believe that Barack Obama should have been prosecuted for that. And that was a mistake because he was acting like a king. But oh, no. Because he's their leftist, communist, socialist, Marxist darling. So whatever he does is okay. Trump's a threat to their Marxist, socialist vision for America. So everything he does, oh, he's a dictator. He's acting like a king. Again, I expect that out of the Marxist, socialist, no brains channel, MSNBC, and others like them. I don't expect that out of Supreme Court justices. And I find it deeply disturbing that they would do it. By the way, I thought long and hard about the al-Awlaki situation. I didn't come to an immediate conclusion about that because I thought that is problematic. He is an American citizen. But believe it or not, this is one of those rare cases in which I actually sided with Barack Obama. Because I believe that as an American citizen, if you join enemy combatants against the United States, you declare yourself an enemy of the United States with them, you take up arms against your own country, you have effectively renounced your citizenship, and you are then rightly treated as an enemy combatant, not as a citizen with constitutional protections. So I think taking al-Awlaki out was the right thing to do. But there was a lot of debate about it. He's an American citizen. Can the president do that? I tell you what, I don't hear leftists complaining about it. Look, folks, these people have an agenda for this country. Donald Trump is in their way, and they will do pretty much anything in their power to get him out of the way. And the Supreme Court is busy knocking down everything they tried to do. They tried to keep him off the ballot. Remember Colorado? The Supreme Court said, you can't do that. States do not have authority to do that. The Enron case, basically, the Enron case is about January 6th. It's not the Enron case. It's actually Fisher versus the United States. But the prosecution of many of the January 6th defendants is based on a law that was passed because of the Enron scandal to say that it is a federal crime to obstruct an official proceeding. Now, what Enron was doing to obstruct the official proceeding was they were getting rid of documents. They were destroying evidence. And in the context of that law, that's what it was intending to refer to. What the Supreme Court said in this Fisher case is this guy, Fisher, brought the case in behalf of himself, obviously. And he had some pretty ugly tweets that he sent out about, time to go to war over Donald Trump's loss and all that. However, the Supreme Court said this law was not intended to give government the authority to prosecute people because they interfered with the ability to carry out an official proceeding, but rather goes to the issue of, are they destroying evidence? Are they destroying documents? Are they interfering with witnesses? In other words, are they doing things to make it impossible to carry out that official function because they are interfering with the documents and the people necessary to carry it out? So the Supreme Court took a narrower interpretation of that law. So many of the people who've been convicted will probably have their convictions overturned because they didn't really do anything under that law to obstruct an official proceeding. The official proceeding was disrupted and the official proceeding was postponed because of their activity, but there was no evidence destroyed, there were no witnesses tampered with, there was nothing done that made it impossible to carry out the official duties. Another win for Donald Trump, because that's the basis upon which they're trying to get him, obstructing an official proceeding. And Donald Trump certainly didn't do any of that. We'll see how far that goes, but that's considered to be a win for Trump. And now this, where presidential immunity is once again, as it historically has been, affirmed. And they act like it's the end of the world. The country as we know it is over. We now have a dictatorship. I mean, do you realize, too, how dangerous it is for Supreme Court justices to be saying this stuff? Of course, we shouldn't be surprised when Ketanji Jackson says, I don't know what a woman is, I'm not a biologist. When they've gone that deep into the ideological abyss that is Marxism and leftism and moral and social and cultural relativism, it's hard to imagine they're ever coming out without just a mighty move of God in the lives of these people. It's hard to imagine they're ever coming out of this. They are caught in the quicksand of this ideological madness. And that's how you get statements like this. That now the president could hire SEAL Team 6 to go out and kill his political opponent. Wow. I mean, it just doesn't get more absurd. And this, now the president can use the military to organize a coup to take over power permanently, and somehow he would have immunity for that. That's not part of his official duties. It's not a core official duty for the president to engage in a coup, to overthrow the constitutional republic of the United States of America and turn it into a dictatorship with a lifetime dictator ruling over it. That's not within the president's official duties, I dare say. Now, let me just, by the way, say, and I don't know Donald Trump personally, but the man's already got a public record, okay? This is my belief. And if it weren't, I'd be saying probably the same things they're saying. But they're off their rockers. I really believe that Donald Trump is like George Washington in this sense. Now, not like George Washington in every way, but like George Washington in this sense. George Washington was seen as a man of ambition, a man of great stature. He was well respected. Not that there weren't detractors, there were. Don't let anybody tell you that George Washington didn't have his detractors. He did. I mean, and remember, he fell out with Alexander Hamilton, or maybe I better put it, Alexander Hamilton fell out with him. Because Alexander Hamilton was a brilliant man, but not somebody that I admire. Because I think Alexander Hamilton had some profound problems. And when he fell out with George Washington, it was because he just completely lacked any kind of humility. And basically, I think he looked at George Washington and thought, well, he's no better than I am. When the fact of the matter is, maybe not as a human being before God, obviously, but the fact of the matter is, in terms of wisdom and stature, George Washington was better than better than Alexander Hamilton. But I said all that to say Trump reminds me of George Washington in this sense. He has given up a lot in order to secure liberty for the people of the United States of America. Now, I believe that. Because look, Donald Trump's a billionaire. I believe his business has been hurt, not helped. Now, even though by doing an IP with Truth Social, he's now become wealthier, at least on paper, than he was before, because it's worth several $1 billion and he owns the lion's share of the stock. But his brand has been hurt. His businesses have been hurt across the world. Now, obviously, he's still got a ton of money and he's still generating a lot of income, and he still flies around in what is that thing, a Boeing 747 or whatever it is, a luxury Boeing 747 designed for his personal use. I mean, so the man is doing okay for himself. He doesn't need this. He doesn't need this. But he's putting all of that at risk for his country. 4 criminal prosecutions that he's got to deal with, that he's got to endure. And people saying things like this: he's a king, he's a dictator, he's got to endure. But I believe this man is doing. But you know, there were some people who thought George Washington wanted to be a king. Nothing further from the truth. I believe this man wants the very best for the people of the United States of America. I really believe that. That's Donald Trump's heart. He wants you and me and others to live free and prosperous and hopeful lives. And he wants that for our children and our grandchildren. And I believe that that's what Donald Trump is working for. And he wants America to be secure. He wants us to be a safe country. He wants us to be a country in which Americans don't have to be afraid of going out on the streets of our cities, in which we don't have to be afraid of being carjacked or having our home invaded, or having our children killed by illegal aliens who've invaded our country and are running around wreaking havoc, MS-13 and Venezuelan gangs. He doesn't want any of that. He doesn't want America in a bunch of senseless wars, fighting for other people who won't fight for themselves, and financing fights that people won't finance on their own, or that nations won't finance on their own. I think Donald Trump's first and foremost principle, I believe, for all of his policies and his worldview as a president, is America first. America first. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. I guarantee you, if Donald Trump is reelected, and I really believe that he will be, if he's reelected, he will serve 4 years. It will be 4 years of, he will have to endure every imaginable kind of attack. And I had some of you say to me in various settings, and I agree with it, he needs the utmost protection around him, because these people hate him so much. I mean, when you say things like what the Supreme Court is saying, you're asking people to kill the man. Because you're setting, like I said, they compared him to Adolf Hitler. They compared him to Osama bin Laden. Well, what did we do to Osama bin Laden? So you're inviting people to do harm to the man. Well, I believe Donald Trump's chief ambition at this stage of his life is to leave America better off than he found it. More free, more prosperous, more stable, more at peace with the world, stronger, more respected than we've been at any time in the recent past. I think that's what he wants. I love this country. I'm a constitutionalist. If I believe for a moment Donald Trump wants to somehow upend the Constitution and throw off the Constitution and set himself up as a dictator, I'd be the first person to say, absolutely, oh no. But they're only saying this kind of stuff because they're brainwashed into believing it by their cult buddies, and because Donald Trump's in the way of their power grab. And they see themselves right on the cusp of getting the very thing they're accusing him of wanting absolute power. That's what they want. Absolute power to control this country. Absolute power. And by the way, let me add this. What makes these people so dangerous, you see, is that they are unanchored by anything that has anything to do with truth. Their truth is whatever they're feeling on a given day. I've said before, I'd rather lose an election honorably than cheat and win. They don't think that way. They look at me and say, well, you're a fool, because winning is all that matters. Once you win, you can do this and you can do that once you win. So you have to skirt the edges of integrity and honor and decency and truth and all that to win. Who cares? Get in there. Then you can do great work. The ends justify the means. They're unanchored by any sense of absolute morality, truth, anything, which means they can just float off into the ether and try to take everybody with them. They can create a dystopian world of chaos in which anything and everything goes depending on how everybody feels. By the way, a world in which if you don't feel the same way they feel, they will beat you into submission, or prosecute you into submission, or punish you into submission, or starve you into submission until you realize that you've got to go along with them. How do we know? Because they're doing it to Donald Trump right now, and we've seen them do it to others. Look at what they're doing to the J6 people. On the other hand, the criminals, the illegal alien invaders that they think are going to somehow help them to get and keep power, cashless bail. Let's not cooperate with ICE. Leave them to run the streets. Leave them to rape, to rob, to murder, to you name it. That's okay. Because they're our ticket to absolute power. They're going to help us get that. So let's get them licenses. Let's get them registered to vote. Let's get them ready so that we can either cheat and have them vote, or the time will come when we have enough power to give them amnesty, and then they can vote, and they'll all vote for us because we are their great benefactors. So then we can limit freedom of speech, we can limit freedom of religion, we can do away with the right to keep and bear arms, we can spend ourselves into oblivion, we can enrich ourselves, empower ourselves in whatever way we think we need to, for the good of the people, of course. All for the good of the people. The last claim of the scoundrel. Yeah, you want to know why my plate is full of food and you're eating scraps? For the good of the people. I mean, that was what Stalin said, that was what Lenin said, that was what Hitler said, that was what Pol Pot said, that's what Ho Chi Minh said, that's what Fidel Castro said. Power to the people is for the good of the people. And now we know what they really meant was it's for our good. And the people be damned. And you know, I don't mean that vulgarly. You understand? Who cares? The people are here to serve us, not the other way around. So this is what makes these people so dangerous. Here's what the Supreme Court could have said. I mean, what the dissenters could have said. They could have said, well, we understand that the president needs a certain level of immunity, Or they could have said, we don't believe that the president needs any immunity of any kind. And we are going to break with precedent. And here's why. And this laid out their case. Rather than all this, we now have a king. What? The Supreme Court dissenters, we now have a king. No, we don't. We got a president. His name is Joe Biden. And after the election, I hope we'll have another one whose name is Donald J. Trump. And I don't want either one of them to be a king. And I don't see the Supreme Court decision as making anybody a king. And by the way, let me add one other thing. You know, judges have immunity. You can't sue a judge for their decisions. And judges have absolute immunity in the rendering of their decisions, unless, again, you find out that their decisions are, oh, and by the way, they said this gives him, the president, the ability to take a bribe. Lord. Judges have absolute immunity as long as they're not found to be taking bribes. If they are rendering their decisions as they see fit, even though you and I may disagree with them completely, they cannot be sued. And they cannot be criminally prosecuted. And we know judges have let out people who've gone out and committed heinous murder, and you and I, with common sense, say, why did you let that person out? Why did you, I mean, it was obvious this is a dangerous individual. But you can't prosecute that judge for criminality. You can't prosecute that judge for the murder that that person committed, even though that judge is responsible for putting that person on the streets. Can't prosecute the judge for the rape that was committed, the home invasion that was committed, the robbery that was committed, or the murder that was committed. You can't charge a judge with any of that because they have immunity. I wonder, are they prepared to give theirs up? Do they think that they're having immunity makes them kings or queens? Of course, apparently to Ketanji Jackson, there's no difference. You see the hypocrisy, but this is always the left's way. I've said, I don't know whether you all ever heard me use this illustration, but it is so true. The Bolsheviks come into Russia, early 1900s. I think they've taken over by 1913, I think, 1914, but they take over. And they rail against the rich, and they rail against their mansions, and they rail against their Rolls Royces, and they rail against their beautiful homes. And all of this, they've robbed the people for all of this. And when they took over, guess who was driving the Rolls Royces and living in those homes? The very communists who had railed against them. It wasn't about trying to do something for the people. It was about wanting the power to do something for themselves. And you all know they turned the Soviet Union into a slave empire, because every single person in the Soviet Union was in effect a slave. No liberty, no autonomy, no ability to do anything you wanted to do with your life. And if you dare to buck the system, you dare to suggest that you weren't in agreement with the communist regime, you get sent off to Siberia or put in a labor camp or tortured or killed. That's what they had in mind for the people. And these leftists who are crying about presidential immunity, they are the dangerous ones. They are the true threat to our way of life, our constitutional republic. So, Donald Trump is winning some victories, thank God, in the Supreme Court. And it is my prayer that all these cases against him will eventually go away. He's got a sentencing hearing on the 11th. I trust that this Judge Merchan, or whatever his name is, will realize in light of this new decision on presidential immunity that he better go back and rethink this whole trial that he's just put Trump through. Because they may not be able to uphold that prosecution, since some of the things that they used against him had to do with his official duties. And I would say if the carrying out of your official duties gives you immunity, presumptive immunity from prosecution or civil lawsuit, then using your carrying out your official capacity, your official duties, using evidence from that, to me, ought to be thrown out as well. Now, there may be legal scholars who would disagree with that, but to me, it undermines the evidentiary basis of the case. So it'll be interesting to see what he does, but I trust there won't be a sentencing hearing on there shouldn't be a sentencing hearing on July the 11th, and this thing ought to be put off. Allow the constitutional dust to settle from the Supreme Court decisions to figure out, okay, what can or should we now do, if anything, with this, if anything. Well, that's going to do it. It turns out I didn't have to interrupt, so I'm glad I started on time. Look, we're coming up to July 4th. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do about July 4th in terms of this program. I'm inclined to do it on July 4th. July 4th is a very important day to all of us. I am looking forward to it. It's a day that I always reflect on the blessing of course, I do this all the time, as you can imagine, but a special day for reflecting on the blessing of being an American, the blessing of being a citizen, not a subject, but a citizen in the greatest nation in the history of mankind. The blessing of enjoying more freedom and a higher standard of living than ordinary people do anywhere else around the world. So we got a lot to celebrate in spite of what the left is trying to do to our country. And we're going to defeat them. We will. I guarantee you we will. The fact of the matter is, they're already defeated because they're really following doctrines of demons. So they're already defeated. It just may take some time for it to manifest in the physical, natural world, but in the spirit, they've already lost. They have already lost. Because everything they do, they're doing in the flesh. And the flesh profits nothing, but the spirit gives life. We're on the side of life. They're on the side of death. We're on the side of truth. They're on the side of lies. We're on God's side. They're on the devil's side. So stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up. Because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side. God bless everybody.